this module is going to be to cover the basic trig identities. Call it the trig identities module. Or maybe we'll call it trig identities 1. Trig identities 1, because it's only going to cover really the relationship between sine, cosine, tangent, and then cosecant and secant. So really just the definitions of those identities, if you will, and how they relate to each other, and a little bit of the Pythagorean identity. It's not going to go into the double angle and the half angle and all of that. Maybe we'll do a trig identities 2 that will cover all of that. So a typical example of this, they might say, well, maybe they'll say, this will be an example question. We'll go over more of the different types that we might cover. But the sine of, we'll say that sine of x is equal to the square root of 3 over 2. What is secant of x? Secant of x. Or we could even say secant of x is equal to question mark. What is secant of x equal to? So what is secant of x? And so the choices here, they might just be a bunch of, well, all possible choices. Maybe we'll put a square root of 3 over 2 here. Square root, let me write it. Square root of 3 over 2. We could write a 2 over square root of 3, or we might want to rationalize that denominator either way, just so in case people think that the secant is the inverse of sine. 2 over the square root of 3, or we could rationalize this. So this could be, or if you multiply the square root of 3, it could be 2 square roots of 3 over 3, depending on how fancy we want to get. We could put the right answer, which is 2. We could put 1/2. Or we could even put square root of 3, so the tangent. So square root of that over 1/2 is going to be square root of 3. So all things that might show up if a student makes maybe a little bit of a boneheaded mistake or doesn't know the material. And so if they click hint the first time they click hint, and once again, you don't have to draw the bullet points out. This is just to recognize that this is the first hint. Why not just give them the definition of secant? So you could write secant of x is equal to 1 over the cosine of x. That might be all they need. They say, hey, I know how to figure out the cosine of x from sine of x, and then I could use that to figure out the secant of x. So that's the first hint. The second hint we'll give them, we'll say, look, sine squared of x plus cosine squared of x is always equal to 1, the Pythagorean identity. If that's not enough, they can click hint again, and then they could say, well, sine of x is equal to square root of 3 over 2. Square root of 3 over 2. So, and we'll just substitute square root of 3 over 2 into this equation right there. And maybe we'll color code it. We'll put it in, let's say you put it in that color. So then when you put it into the equation, so you'd say, so square root of 3 over 2, and then everything else can be in the regular color, squared plus cosine of x squared is equal to 1. And then we can just work it out. We could even put all of the steps at once, because this really isn't to test people's notion of algebra. So this hint can have all of this. So square root of 3 over 2 squared is 3/4. 3/4 plus cosine squared of x is equal to 1. Subtract 3/4 from both sides. Cosine squared of x is equal to 1/4. And we could say that cosine of x, and of course, it could also be, well, cosine of x is going to be, we could also be negative 1/4, but we'll just say cosine of x is equal to, or negative 1/2 is equal to 1/2. We're going to assume the positive on this, and then we're done. Oh, we're not done. And then the last hint, if they still don't know how to do it, we just have to connect that to that up there. So the last hint is going to be secant of x. Secant of x is equal to 1 over this. 1 over 1/2, which is equal to 2. And of course, then that would be the correct answer. Now, the other types of questions we might ask in this module are things, so that's just one example, but we might ask sine of x is equal to a, and a is going to be given, and then we'll say cosine of x is equal to question mark. So that would just be a straight up Pythagorean identity. And then you could do the opposite. You could also say cosine of x is equal to a, where it's some number that you can deal with, like, that's a typical one. What is sine of x? Sine of x is equal to question mark. We'll have sine of x is equal to a. Sine of x is equal to a. Tangent of x is equal to question mark. Could also have a cosine of x there. Cosine of x is equal to a. What is tangent of x? You could have, we already saw the sine of x, secant of x. You could have the cosine of x, secant of x, cosine of x, cosecant of x. So really any combination between all of these different things. All of the relations between sine, cosine, tangent, secant, and cosecant. So you give the student any one of these and ask them for any one of the other ones and give appropriate hints.